government prints and inflates our currency, they will never stimulate the economy that way, not for long. The economy can only be stimulated by cutting taxation, cutting regulation, making it easier for business to do business inside of the United States. Once we do that, business will start forming. We've lost a lot of jobs overseas, and folks, those jobs aren't coming back. We will never be a producer of linen again. We'll probably never be a producer of paper again. But jobs will come back, because if we have a business-friendly climate, we'll invent things. We're very good at nanotechnologies. We're very good at information technologies. We're very good at high-tech stuff that pays really well. And if we make it possible to do business in this country, business will come. It's a slow process. It's not going to be fast. We're not going to cut taxes and everybody's going to have a job. It doesn't happen that way. But it'll happen slow by sure. I like to go back to being available to the constituents. That is the most important thing that I think any representative can do. You see, during the Constitutional Convention, there was a huge argument that was taking place, and it threatened to derail the entire Constitutional Convention. And that argument was over representation in Congress. And the small, less populated states wanted every state to be represented equally in the Congress. And the larger, more populated states wanted every state to be represented according to their population. And one can understand why on both regards. But they came to loggerheads over this. And again, it threatened to derail the entire Constitutional Convention, which many feel would have been the end of the United States, because all we had then was the Articles of Confederation. And the Articles of Confederation didn't allow the federal government to tax, didn't allow the federal government to really govern. It was a very weak executive that had absolutely no power. And Shays' Rebellion was an example of what would happen if the Articles of Confederation had continued. But there was a gentleman from Connecticut, and he came up from the Connecticut delegation, and he came up with a compromise. They called it the Connecticut Compromise. It later became known as the Great Compromise of the Constitutional Convention. And at that compromise is that each state will send up 2 senators. Then, according to their population, they'll send up representatives for a separate house. Hence, 2 houses of Congress. That's why my sign doesn't say Bill Gunn for Congress. Everybody argued with me when we first started and said, "You gotta say Bill Gunn for Congress, like everybody else does." No, I don't. I've got to say what's correct. Bill Gunn for U.S. Representative. Congress is 2 houses. I'm only running for one of them. But the Senate, the 2 senators from every state, were to be appointed by the legislatures from that state. They were to represent the state's interests more than the voters' interests. You see, that was part of the checks and the balances the framers of the Constitution were putting in. The framers of the Constitution knew that the federal government had to be limited. They had just fought a war to escape a large, powerful central government. And they knew that the federal government had to be limited, so they did that by putting in ways for the states to maintain their interests. See, the states were supposed to be these autonomous, almost little countries, all unto themselves, that were united in a republic that protected their rights to exist. Now, the House of Representatives, on the other hand, they were voted directly by the people of their districts. They were meant to be the closest to the people in their districts. That's why they call them representatives. You know, they didn't call them legislators. They didn't call them little monarchs. They called them representatives. They are supposed to represent the people that elect them. It was intended that they would come from them, and they did. They used to come from them. There have been wonderful farmers. There have been wonderful lawyers and everything in between that have worked in the House of Representatives. They were meant to go home after a short while. But the American public used to be completely engaged. See, when the framers wrote the Constitution, America was a different place. America, when people first started coming over here to America, they left England for usually religious reasons, and they came over here, they got established in these little bitty towns. There was no central government over here. There was no state government over here. So they established their own little government in the towns. And we in New England are lucky enough to still have that form of government, the town meeting. That's why we have these. The town meeting is where pure democracy takes place. People take their shoes off and throw them at each other over things like, should we spend $1 million on a firehouse? And you got the one side that wants it and the one side that doesn't. And they hammer it out and they come to a decision and everybody lives with it. And so people became fiercely independent of the central government in the United States. It got ingrained into our DNA. So after we had the Revolutionary War, we sat down and said, okay, what kind of government are we going to have here? And they said, well, the most powerful government has to be that town hall meeting. The weakest or least intrusive government has to be this federal government that we're creating right now. It's simply here to protect our rights, to protect our borders, to protect us from invaders, to make money. Not make money as in earn it, but to take gold and silver and put a stamp in it and make money and give it to everybody to use as a means to trade stuff. And that's what they're supposed to do. And they based that on, because these people were very well educated. They were well read in philosophy. They were well read in economics. They were well read in politics. And what they knew was the type of governing that had been tried and allowed people the most liberty. And liberty is so essential to a human being.